May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. In the ancient world, everybody knew who the untouchables were. You didn't have to look them up. You didn't need a list. You simply knew by instinct, by upbringing, by the invisible social architecture that told you where to walk and where not to, who to greet and who to step around. Tax collectors were untouchables. They were Jews who had sold themselves to the Roman occupation, who skimmed off the top, who made themselves rich by making their neighbors poor. They were collaborators, traitors, and people had good reasons to despise them. A woman with a hemorrhage, 12 years of bleeding. She was untouchable too. And not just because of her illness, the law declared her ritually unclean. Everything she touched became unclean. Everyone who touched her became unclean. She was not merely sick. She was, by the reckoning of her community, a source of contagion. Spiritual, legal, social. She had learned how to make herself invisible, how to stay to the edges, and not to ask for too much. And then there was the dead girl. You can't get more untouchable than that. To touch a corpse in first century Jewish practice was to take on the deepest form of ritual and purity. Even the most compassionate person would have kept their distance, would have let the wailers do their work from outside the door. 3 untouchables in one passage. Matthew, the tax collector, the bleeding woman, the dead child. And Jesus walks straight toward all of them. Notice what the Jesus in Matthew's gospel doesn't do. He doesn't say, let me think about this. Let me weigh the social consequences. Let me consider whether it's wise to be seen in this company. The text simply says he got up and followed. He doesn't appear to have given it a second thought. He sees a man the rest of the world has written off, and he says, follow me. Then, because apparently having Matthew follow him wasn't enough, Jesus goes to Matthew's house for dinner, and there, gathered around the table, are more tax collectors and more sinners. A whole collection of people that polite religious society had categorized as not worth the effort. The Pharisees see this and they're offended, as the Pharisees often are when someone violates the rules they have decided God cares about. Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners, they ask. Jesus' answer is one of the most quietly devastating things he ever says. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. He's quoting Hosea. He's telling the most religious people in the room that they have fundamentally misunderstood what religion is for. That their elaborate systems of purity and separation have become a way of keeping God's mercy away from the people who need it the most. That God is not interested in their careful maintenance of the boundaries. God is interested in the ones who've been left outside of them. Then mid-story, a synagogue leader falls at Jesus' feet. His daughter has just died. He's a man of standing, a man of religion, a man who surely knows the rules about corpse impurity. And he doesn't care. Come and lay your hand on her and she will live. Jesus gets up and follows him. But on the way, the bleeding woman reaches out and touches the fringe of Jesus' cloak. She's been sick for 12 years. She's spent everything she had on doctors. She's not supposed to be in this crowd. She's not supposed to be touching anyone. But she's desperate. And she's somehow come to believe that if she can just get close enough to this man, something will change. She touches him from behind. She's trying not to be seen. But Jesus stops. And he turns around and he sees her. He doesn't recoil. He doesn't declare himself now ritually contaminated. He doesn't ask someone to inform the priest that he'll need to undergo purification. He says, "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has made you well." He calls her daughter. He restores her, not just physically, but to relationship. He restores her to community, to belonging, and he makes her touchable. And then he continues to the house and takes the dead girl by the hand. In a world where the touch of the unclean contaminated the clean, Jesus works in reverse. His cleanness is not diminished by contact with the impure. His holiness is not threatened by proximity to the outcast. Instead, when he touches the untouchable, they become clean. They become whole. They come back to life. So here's the question I want to sit with this morning, and I invite you to sit with it also. Who are the untouchables in our midst? Not in Jesus' world, but in ours, right here, right now. Every community has them, every town, every church, every institution has the people that the rest of us, by unspoken consensus, have agreed to keep at arm's length. Sometimes the exclusion is overt. More often it's polite, civilized, invisible to those doing the excluding, but absolutely visible to those being excluded. Who are the people in our world that we step around? The ones we don't invite to the table, the ones we're not sure what to do with, so we've quietly decided to do nothing. Maybe it's the person whose politics makes us uncomfortable. Maybe it's the one with the addiction that keeps relapsing. Maybe it's the family that never quite fits in, the one whose kids are difficult, whose situation is complicated, whose needs feel like more than we know how to handle. Maybe it's the elderly neighbor who's become invisible now that she can't get out much. Maybe it's the young man who just got out of prison. Maybe it's the immigrant family that our neighbors are grumbling about. Maybe it's the person who used to come to church here and left under painful circumstances. Nobody quite knows how to talk about it. Maybe, and I say this gently, maybe it's the person sitting near you right now who's been coming to this church for months or years and has never quite felt like they belonged, who's been reaching out from the edges hoping someone would turn around and see them. Every age produces its own taxonomy of the untouchables. Every generation decides, mostly without discussion, who's worthy of full humanity and who's not. And every generation that does this believes it has good reasons. The Pharisees had good reasons. These people are sinners. They break the rules. These people bring impurity into our midst. And Jesus looks at all of it and says, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Following Jesus is not primarily a matter of believing the right things, though what we believe matters. It's not primarily a matter of observing the right rituals, though our liturgies form and sustain us. Following Jesus means walking in the direction that Jesus walked. And Jesus walked toward the untouchables every time, without hesitation, without calculation. He walked toward the ones that everyone else was carefully walking around. This is the shape of discipleship. This is what it means to take up a cross and follow. The cross, after all, was Rome's way of making someone maximally untouchable, stripped, shamed, and hung outside the city walls where the decent people wouldn't have to look. And Jesus went there too. So the question is not whether there are untouchables in our world. There are. The question is whether we will let Jesus' movement become our movement. Whether we will let his direction become our direction. Whether we'll stop managing our distance from the people who make us uncomfortable and start walking toward them instead. This is not easy, and I won't pretend it is. Sometimes it costs us something. Sometimes it complicates our lives. Sometimes people we respect will raise an eyebrow and say, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And we can say with a quiet confidence that comes not from us but from Jesus, because that's what he does. And we're following him. And there's one more thing I want to notice in this passage. The bleeding woman reached out her hand. She just touched the fringe of his cloak, and she was healed. She expected, perhaps, that no one would notice. She could take what she needed and slip back into the shadows, anonymously. But Jesus stopped and turned around, and in doing so, he made the invisible woman visible. He called her not by name, but by something even better. He called her daughter. He gave her back her dignity in front of everyone. He didn't let her healing be a secret transaction in the crowd. He wanted her to be known as healed, as restored, as belonging. And that's what we're called to do too. Not just to extend charity from a safe distance, but to stop and turn around, to see the person who's been crying, trying not to be seen, to say with our presence and our welcome and our time and our attention, "You're not invisible to me. You're not untouchable. You are a daughter, you are a son, and you belong here." There are people all around us who are reaching out from the edges, hoping someone will notice, hoping someone will turn around. And it is my prayer that we may be the ones who do. Amen.